too, dude. For real. It's good to see you, man.
Hey, everybody. We are actually live, and we were having a mini conversation, so I interrupted all of us so that I could say hello to our live audience. Thank you for showing up for our chat about extreme horror. We were throwing punches and dodging bullets just like 2 seconds ago, so we'll make sure to recreate that for everyone, because I know that's what you showed up for. My name is Mother Horror, and we are live on our Nightworms YouTube channel. And Nightworms is a horror subscription package that you could get every month, where we include all kinds of horror, mainstream, traditional, indie, extreme, gothic, all of the brands and subgenres. And we ship that out to our customers every single month. And so I just want to take a brief minute here to introduce the entire panel. Jared is here from Death's Head Press. Jared, you have to kind of wave to people because that's what I like. Jared.
I think he froze.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
He's very
did too.
stoic.
Well, that's how he was already, so I couldn't tell if he's frozen or not. And then Paul
moved a little bit.
Paul Michael Anderson is here, and we actually included a Paul Michael Anderson book in one of our packages called Stand Alone. And we also have Chandler Morrison. Chandler is the author of Along the Path of Torment, as well as some Death's Head Press titles like Dead Inside and Until the Sun. John Wayne, tell me your last name again, John Wayne.
Comunale.
That.
It means community in Italian.
I like that.
I totally said it right.
And that is, he wrote a book here called Mage of the Hellmouth that just recently came out through Grindhouse Press, right, John Wayne?
Yes, it did.
And we have Kristopher Triana. And Kristopher Triana is nominated for a Splatterpunk Award for this book here, right?
Yep.
Is it this one? Yeah, Gone to See the Riverman. And Christine Morgan is also with us today. And she wrote this awesome Death's Head Press splatter western, and it's called The Night Silver River Run Red. And my Nightworms review team absolutely devoured this book. This is also nominated for a splatter western or a Splatterpunk Award. And I also have Nadia Bulkin. And Nadia has written my favorite collection by a woman I don't mind saying. This is She Said Destroy. I just can't recommend this book enough.
Adore it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So that is everyone in the house. Jared actually left us, so he'll be back, I'm sure. Here he is. He's hiding in the green room. Okay, and then just as a little heads up tribute type of horror community love thing, we wanted to say a brief word about someone that the community has recently lost. So I'm going to go ahead and let Christine take that.
Yeah, I thought that we could all take a moment to remember our friend Dave Barnett, without whom really we might not even be doing this, because he was one of the founders of the extreme horror small press movement, who gave Ed Lee a chance with some of his crazier stuff. And without Ed Lee, I know I wouldn't be here right now. I didn't know Dave very well personally, met him a few times at conventions, but I remember just having such a great time at KillerCon, hanging out with him, and Ed Lee ordered enough Chinese food to sink a battleship. And we all just sat around and, shot the shit. And he was a great guy, and he'll be sorely missed. And I think we all owe him a big debt.
Yes.
Yeah,
we definitely do.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, he was the head of Necro Publications and put out so many great writers, like Charlie Jacob and Edward Lee. And it was a huge honor for me to be published in one of his anthologies.
Same.
Yeah, it was a big thrill. I wanted to work with Necro for a long time, having read them since, for like 20 years, read those books. So yeah, Dave gave a lot to this industry, this subgenre of horror. So yeah, he'll definitely be missed. It's really a tragedy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks you guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut anyone off if somebody wanted to say something.
No.
No.
I think they said it pretty eloquently.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue into a little conversation we could have really quick if you guys want to go around and talk about maybe some of your influences, maybe what you consider, what you have offered to the horror community in terms of your voice and your books and what you are working on, and then also who inspired you to write and to do this. We can start with you, Paul.
Oh, good.
Because you're this way to me, so.
My contributions to horror include the collection Bones Are Made to Be Broken, and you pointed out Standalone, which was my latest book, which is probably the closest I've gotten to extreme horror, but it was also weirdly sci-fi, so go figure that one out. I like stuff that leaves you emotionally wrought at the end of it. That's my kind of bag, which is funny because my influences were people growing up were Harlan Ellison and Jack Ketchum, which are more visceral on different ends of the spectrum, except for Red, which is a great book. Yeah, oh my goodness. Did you read his last novel, right? Secret Life of Souls?
I've read everything by him. Yep.
Oh God. I still have one book I have not read. I've been savoring it. It's on my shelf. I have not read this one yet.
Yes. It's also known as Stranglehold. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm holding off because that would be the last one for me. But he was a big influence on me growing up. And nowadays, my people are the people I like are Christy DeMeester, Rachel Autumn Deering, Bracken McLeod, obviously, for reasons that are kind of obvious since we work together. People like that.
Cool. John Wayne?
Okay. So, what was the question exactly? What did I do yesterday? Or
talk about Scummer, John Wayne.
You said talk about our contribution to horror, just what we've done, right?
Yeah, what's out
books.
there so our audience can know, and then also who are your influences?
Okay, cool. So my 10th published book just came out, Mage of the Hellmouth, that you showed earlier, and so that's my latest foray into a RPG bizarre thing. But I also have The Cycle came out last year, and the rest. I cut my teeth through bizarro fiction and came up through there, and then just kind of made this natural progression to horror. But all my stuff is still rooted in weirdness. I'm heavily influenced by The Outer Limits and Twilight Zone and Amazing Stories. I like to keep twisting the knife till the very end, if possible. My biggest influence is probably Kurt Vonnegut's my all-time favorite writer, and Slaughterhouse-Five is my all-time favorite book. And when I read that book, it captured my imagination in a way. Just with the simple sentence, Billy Pilgrim came unstuck in time. And I was just from there, I was But then also Jeremy Robert Johnson, when I first read Angel Dust Apocalypse, I was also now I know where I can start sending my writing. Now I know that there's a place for stuff like this. So I started, so he definitely got me in there. And then smash cut to 2 years later, I'm sitting at the bar next to him, telling him I want to be you, dude. So, and here I am now. So there you go.
Yeah, he's awesome. I read Skullcrack City and I was what is this? And I want more of it.
Yeah.
I started with Entropy and Bloom, and that was an amazing collection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a great collection for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Christy Morgan, you're up.
Well, I'm probably the oldest one here. So I started out reading a lot of just the old paperbacks from hell. Grady Hendrix's presentation is my childhood in a nutshell. For influences, Lee, of course, and Lee reading City Infernal, that and Richard Lehman's One Rainy Night were the moment for me that it was like, wait, we can do that? We can go that wild, that crazy? So I knew that was where I wanted to be, and I've never looked back. As for my contributions, well, I bring cookies to a lot of events.
That's a great contribution.
I make some weird dolls and other crazy craft shit. But I also, of course, I guess when I decided to go for it, I knew I might as well go big or go home. So with a title like Sperm Jackers from Hell, that doesn't leave a whole lot of gray area. You know what you're getting.
I can like see the book cover in my head too.
Yeah. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Chandler, you are up.
Hey everyone. So as for my contributions, my first couple of books were self-published. The first book I ever self-published was Dead Inside, which has now been re-released through the good folks at Death's Head Press. I've got a couple other ones that I self-published, a short story collection called Just to See Hell and a novel called Hate to Feel. And Death's Head Press did another book called Until the Sun. And Adewaddle Press did Along the Path of Torment. And in respect to my influences, Bret Easton Ellis, Chuck Palahniuk, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Joan Didion, I'm really big into language and emotion and relationships, particularly the relationships between sad, attractive, rich people who make really bad decisions and end up getting other people hurt. And that's something I like to explore. And so extreme horror has allowed me to really go down some really dark paths that I think I wouldn't be afforded in other genres. So that's me.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, Nadia, it's your turn.
Hi, I'm Nadia. Let's see. Contributions. I guess I only have one book out, unlike most of these people. It's a short story collection. She Said Destroy.
Cool.
And I guess what I am sort of pigeonholed known for is social political horror, sort of feminist horror sometimes. So yeah, that's basically what I've contributed, I guess. In terms of influences, Shirley Jackson, probably my biggest one within horror. Outside of that, I would say Cormac McCarthy, Flannery O'Connor. My favorite book is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller.
I love that book.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great book. And Cormac McCarthy too. I think I read The Road and it killed me. And I vowed I wouldn't read anything like that ever again. And then
that's actually in my opinion his softest work.
It is.
Well, Blood Meridian too. Also, so I obviously didn't keep true to my word, and I kept reading him. So. Yeah, and worse things. Kristopher Triana, you are on deck.
Hi. I've written 12 books. Most of them are horror. Well, I've published 12 books. I've written more than that. The one I have out right now is called The 13th Coyote. It's a splatter western epic. I've also, I have stuff that's extreme horror, like my book Full Brutal, but I have stuff that's more conventional horror as well. What I've tried to give to the genre of extreme horror is to have a book that's more than just the blood and gore, which I have seen a lot of that in extreme horror, where there's not enough of a focus on the depth of character and the actual building of the story, where it just relies too much on shock value. So while some of the stuff that I have in my books is shocking, I'm not trying to just focus on that. I'm trying to really round it out. So I hope that's what I've given. My influences, you mentioned Cormac McCarthy, Nadia. McCarthy is a very big influence on me. And that's a great example of some of the literary extreme horror. You mentioned The Road, Sadie, and I mean, The Road has a scene where they're eating dead babies. You know, they're like, they keep people alive in a basement to cannibalize them.
Yeah.
And this was a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. This was on Oprah, you know, like it's incredible, you know, that they can put this stuff out. You get a baby, right? You get it. But some of the other authors that really influenced me a lot are Hubert Selby Jr., Jack Ketchum was an enormous influence, much like Christine said with Edward Lee. When I read Off Season by Jack Ketchum for the first time, I was like, holy shit, you can do this. We can get away with like going this hardcore. So that was really exciting to me. So yeah, they were big influences. Stuart O'Nan as well, big influence to me. Ted Lewis, the British crime author. There's a lot. Of course, Stephen King, Clive Barker, you know. But yeah, there's many authors that I could name, but those are the ones that come to mind first.
Yeah. Okay, Jared.
No, it's my turn.
It's your turn.
Okay, so realistically, my contribution to the horror community is letting animals like these have a platform to put out their work and have people read it. As far as my influences, you know, I respect a lot of the indie publishers that are around today. Grindhouse, you know, I really have a lot of respect for Rose O'Keefe over at Eraserhead and Deadite. So really, I mean, that's it. I started out as a fan, so really, all of these guys are my influences. I mean, Christine is my influence. Christopher, John Wayne. You know, Chandler, they're all my influences. So pretty much that's it. And that's what we feel our mission is to get the word out about these guys, give them a platform. And
I want to add on there that Frank Stallone is one of my big influences.
Yes. Well, there's two kinds of love.
There's two kinds of love. And that's really kept me warm these 2 weeks now I've been on the road.
Who was that influence? Frank Stallone.
Frank Stallone.
You guessed it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just speak on behalf of all the readers that I know too are hanging out in the chat right now. Extreme horror is one of those things that you kind of get into the vein and then you can't get back out of it. And a lot of people say it's because you've read a lot of horror and then you've become desensitized and you're trying to like wake yourself up. But that's not what it is. I think that there's stereotypes that tell us that that's what that is. Like, oh, you're just becoming addicted to, you know, the gore and the extreme vile nature of the story. But that's really not what it is. It's there's power in these stories. Like I'm thinking of the 13th Coyote. And every single one of my Nightworms crew, and there are 20 of us, we all were talking about how we were emotionally gutted through that story. It wasn't just like showing up for people getting eviscerated. You know, we were emotionally invested in the lives of those fictional people. Yeah, I mean, that's real. And then Chandler's book, Along the Path to Torment, I haven't been moved by a book like that and had so many conflicting emotions in forever. I think the last time I wanted to throw a book across the room was Lolita, and that one, Chandler Morrison blows that one out of the water. So,
hell yeah.
I mean, those are emotions. Like, I don't want to just sit in my bed and read a book and be like, okay, done. You know, like I want to feel something. And I know that all these people over here are saying the same thing. So
I love Nabokov, by the way. I love Lolita. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's a great book. It's challenging and it makes you think, but I think Chandler's like even took it like a step further. I was just saying, like, you know, I should have even mentioned Lolita when I mentioned influences because that book is just so wonderful. I think that might be like if I was on death row and I could have one book to read last, it would probably be that book. Yeah, the prose is wildly off the charts.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. That just kind of sparked in my mind that we should talk about kind of like some of the stereotypes and kind of the brand that you feel like you get locked into I've had that conversation with a couple of you over the last like week, is what do you think your fans are showing up for? And this is a good one for Jared too, as a publisher. Like, do you have to keep doing the same thing over and over again, or do you think your audience will stick with you through whatever you want to put out there?
So are you asking me that?
I'm asking all of you, whoever wants to jump in.
I thought you were asking him first. Yeah.
Right. Well, as far as a publisher, I think DHP has built a pretty loyal following, and a lot of the readers will follow us for what we put out. But I think you always got to be pushing boundaries. Always put out something new and fresh, and keep changing it up. Nobody wants to read the same thing over and over again, just by a different publisher. So, to stay relevant, you kind of have to keep moving forward. And that's it. And we try to do that. And that's about all I have to say about that.
It's about building for me. You're always building on to what you're doing, and what I want to create or cultivate a following who is there to buy. Like, there's certain artists out there that are like, whatever they're putting out, like, it doesn't matter. I'm pre-ordering it. It's mine. I don't care what anybody says about it before it gets there. That's mine. That's the that's the following that I'm trying to cultivate. Like
Frank Stallone.
Like Frank Stallone. like somewhat of a Frank Stallone kind of a thing. But I'm always building, and Chris and I talk about this all the time, being on the road and just meeting people, and that's the foundation. That's what I'm, when I'm looking at this, what I'm trying to create as far as readership. And that was the question, right? I think, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because like certain fans, like I know, like for instance, Dead Inside had this huge kind of like resurgence among some people on Bookstagram. And I just kind of was thinking to myself, like, I wonder if they just are going to keep showing up for that. Like, is Chandler just going to be locked into writing about that situation, that kind of pushing the envelope, or can he just roll out with whatever and people will eat it up?
I know I just talked, but I want to say real quick, I don't think writers like Chandler would fall into that, because his prose is so well done that you're going back for the writing more than that shock. I think when that comes to, when it comes to all writers like that, I think the ones that are truly successful, you're going back for the way they write, the way that they're crafting this story, not necessarily the dead baby they're fucking every time you get in the we're allowed to say that, right? What is this?
Yeah.
This is fucking A.
Well, we're live.
But yeah, fuck it, we'll do it live. But anyway, that's what I mean. And I think that's where extreme writers truly shine in that prose. And I don't even think I write extreme horror. I just kind of write stupid stuff. But where like a Chandler or Chris, or all these, the great writers, it's about that writing rather than I think the whatever you come to expect.
Yeah, I do think that some people get so attached, like they love a certain book so much that they expect the same thing from the writer the next time. And I've tried to be careful with that myself, where I'll have these books that are super extreme, but it's not all that I write. And I don't want people to always expect that. I want them to expect good writing and a good story, regardless of what happens. But I think we should let Chandler answer, since we're talking about him. Probably want to let him answer.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for the kind word. It's really flattering. And I do struggle with it, like wondering what the reader's expectations are, especially now that I've kind of made a name for myself, and it wasn't something I really thought about earlier on when I was just starting out. I was just writing, what I wanted to write, and now I think about that, and I'm not as interested in the shock as I think people think that I am. I think there are certain things that it allows me to do within the story that I'm trying to tell, and when it's appropriate, I will implement that. But it's like Dead Inside. I think there probably are people out there who like it for the gore, and I hope they show up for my other stuff, because I don't intend to just be the gore guy. And that book really isn't about the gore. Like, if you're reading it for the gore, I think you're kind of missing something essential.
Yeah,
and
I
like
agree.
not to, and to sound pretentious, but like that's that book is about something very specific, and the gore is really a satirical element that is, I'm taking something and blowing it to the most ridiculous extreme possible to kind of try and make a point. But I know there are people have opinions to which they're entitled, and I know there are opinions out there that I'm a shock jock, but I really couldn't care less about that piece of it. Like, I'm not trying to shock you. I'm using shocking elements to get to the root of something. And like in Along the Path of Torment, when there's not a lot of stuff in it that is shocking, is very shocking, and it's because it's unfortunately it's based on things that happen, and it's embellished to a degree, but not as much as you would hope. And that's the point, is like there are these horrible things that and they should be, I think, acknowledged. And I think when you really get to you look in the darkest places of the world and you're still able to find some elements of beauty, like that's where you can really reveal something.
Yeah, and I think essentially what we're saying too is, like, in Nadia's case, she said destroy, but I will look for her name in anything that, I mean, once you make an impact on your audience, even just in one short story in an anthology or in a collection or a novel that really like hits people hard, I think they will show up for you time and time again. And it probably would take a lot to steer your audience away from you, even if you're not on brand. Like, I think if Nadia shows up in a story, this book, when did She Said Destroy came out? When was that?
2017.
The case in point. Okay, I read that I think I read it in 2018, but I will look for her in anything that, just because what she did made an impact. And then from there, once you've hooked them in, I think they're yours.
Well, I sure hope so, because I write all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the extreme stuff, the historical stuff, cosmic, eldritch, whatever. I'm just here to have a good time. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to say anything, or language is my Play-Doh. I want to see what I can make out of it.
Oh my God, I love that.
Mm-hmm. and I'm so glad, and more than a little shocked that people follow me along from whatever genre, just because they know that I'm there for a good time, so hopefully they'll have a good time too.
Yeah,
absolutely. That shows.
Good time and woman in love with a good time and other woman.
Good time and
or whatever,
You want to try that again?
We're all having a good time, is what Christine's saying. I'm agreeing with her.
We're here to boogie. Let's boogie.
I totally agree. Okay, so also, is there anything that you guys want to stress upon, like, people who are watching right now that are like stereotypes about the extreme genre label, and then like sticky subjects within that I don't like Christopher's face right now. He's
Thing.
okay, just let it ride.
No, I was just gonna say, because this is something that I've thought about before, and I've mentioned people before, is there's this assumption by some people, not usually people who frequently read extreme horror, because they get it, but there's some people out there that don't get it, that just because you write this thing doesn't mean you want that to happen, doesn't mean that you're into that. Like, I am not some demented pervert just because I wrote a perverted scene. I'm not a pervert. I'm a dangerously disturbed human being, but I'm not a pervert. You know,
subtle difference.
There is a difference. Yeah, there is.
You got a relaxed brain. You know, I'm not punchy.
Yeah. So
every time we get a new staff person at work, and they find out I'm a writer, we have the same conversation. Oh, you write? What do you write? And it's like, all right, we're just going to get this out.
Awkward.
Yeah.
Because in real life, I'm squeamish about everything.
Yeah.
Every single thing.
Yeah.
And it's just, and they're always so shocked. They're like, you seem so nice and normal. Like, well, yeah, but here we are.
I don't understand.
I don't get that either. I don't get the stereotype.
I don't get it. And, like these people, I'm like, what do you think? Do you think Stephen King, takes people, puts them in a bed and hammers them with a sledgehammer and hobbles them? You think that's what he does just because he wrote Misery?
Or he enjoys that, or...
Yeah.
Like he was... More.
Yeah, not anymore. He's got money now, but
that was during the Coke years.
Yeah, it probably was. I mean, that Maximum Overdrive, he did some crazy shit. It's good and terrible.
PAs.
Yeah.
So I've got the first cat interruption. Do I win a prize?
I've had a few dog interruptions, so I think it's all
My
good.
dog's literally asleep beside me right now. She's just
beautiful.
Like, don't look
okay,
at me.
just real quick, are these euphemisms for something that I'm missing? Dog interruption, cat interruption?
No, actual cat interruption.
Okay, just making sure, because
No, I agree with the stereotype, especially like that I work in horror and I review and I have the Nightworm subscription company and stuff. And when people ask me what I do, I have a subscription company. Oh, like Book of the Month Club? And it's like, no, it's not like Book of the Month Club. Oh, what kind of books do you send out to people? I'm like, the worst kind. Like, something that will give them nightmares, something that they'll talk about, something that will unsettle them, hurt them, whatever. That's what I send to people. I do want to open it up for questions if you guys are game with Q&A from our people over here who have a very lively chat going. So, but first I have to pop this up because that's for
Papa.
Nightworms rule.
What is the Nightworms rule? Number 1, never talk about the Nightworms rule.
Number 2, second Nightworms rule is you never talk about Nightworms rule.
They don't have any questions for you, apparently.
Great. Awesome.
Oh,
it's like the classroom for me.
Oh, well, we actually should tell everyone, too, that Kristopher and John Wayne have a weird little show that they do. Right?
Oh, yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah.
Vital
social issues and stuff with Chris and John Wayne.
Yep. We talk about horror.
What is that? What do you talk, like, do you have a theme every week, or is it just kind of like you guys just shoot the shit for a while?
Yeah, we do both. Like, we'll pick one topic and that'll be the focus of the show. But we start with, there's 2 of us, but I still call it our opening monologue, where we just go, hey, everybody, here's what's happening and everything.
We just
we just bullshit. But we do have segments that we do. One is Book of the Week. So every week we pick a book that we promote at random. This is not paid content. Half the time, the writers, if they're not listening to the show, they don't even know that we promoted their book, but we do it anyway. And we always focus on writers that don't have, a movie deal and New York Times bestsellers, like people like us who need the promotion. So we do that. And then we also have my favorite segment, which is Ridiculous Reads, where we read from a book that's completely ridiculous.
That's awesome.
What we do a lot is we'll get novelizations of movies, And like those used to be a big thing, and we'll read from those. Like I recently read from the novelization of Ghostbusters 2, because it's just silly and ridiculous that that's a book, and it is a book.
Or the Bible. One time we read the Bible. I actually did a reading from Ghost Dad, the novelization
which was
for Ghost Dad, which is
what started the segment. That's what started it.
Yeah. If it wasn't only weird enough that already that Ghost Dad had a novelization for some reason, the part in it is so oddly self-referential.
Yes.
That the kids that are Bill Cosby, the character in the movie's kids, are watching the Cosby Show and saying how much Bill Cosby reminds them of their dad. Right. And then the ghost dad comes in and they're like, oh, damn, he does look like Bill Cosby. It's like, you're like, why is this happening? I can only imagine that was in Bill Cosby's contract.
Yeah, it's like a very interesting depiction of, how we're all part of like a computer brain,
Yes.
And actually we're all
all Bill Cosby. Is that what you're about to say?
Story. Yes.
I take offense to that.
Watch your drink. Yes.
I think that Bill Cosby purposely had that written into his contract that they had to reference Ghost Dad looking like Bill Cosby, so you could picture nobody else but Bill Cosby in that role. That's
I'm sure he did.
And so but anyway,
okay, I have questions. I have
Do
questions. Now it's like now there's like too many questions. Shut up, everybody. Where did that go? There was a really good one. Okay, well, we'll do this one first. Well, yeah, we'll do this one too. So everyone tell us what you have going on right now. What are you writing?
Go first.
I feel like I keep talking, so well, John Wayne does too, because we just do that.
We like to talk.
Does anyone else want to say something? I don't want to dominate this whole thing.
Does anybody else want to talk about Chris or my work in progress?
Right.
I'm actually I will say I'm actually binge reading a bunch of Christopher's work. Like I read 13th Coyote and I just wasn't done. Like I just wasn't fucking done, and so now I'm just reading more. But so he has them. He has a whole bunch.
I have the Ruined Season on my to be read pile. It's literally right behind me, and then the Detained.
Nice, yeah. Thank you, man.
Okay, Christine, what are you writing?
Okay, I'm approaching the halfway point on Warlock Infernal, which is a direct sequel to Lake House Infernal. Like it picks up 6 minutes later. And I'd hoped to be farther along by now, but real life has a way of kicking you in the throat. So yeah, I'm only at the halfway point. But Christopher, was it you at KillerCon that said you just hoped June got laid?
Yes, I did. I really just wanted her to get laid. Yeah.
Well,
in that story. That's part of the story, folks. It's not just someone I know. Not just this girl June.
Yeah, you'll get plenty more of that in Warlock Infernal, I promise.
Well, that's a compliment to you. Like the sexual tension in Lake House Infernal is just that strong. Where I'm like, I want this woman to get laid for Christ's sake, Also, it's a great continuation of Lee's City Infernal.
I know. I'm so grateful to him for letting me do that.
Yeah. It's a great continuation of it. So.
Yeah. But yeah, Warlock will pick up right after, and it will follow the surviving characters from Lake House, and
which are few.
Expand upon the lake itself and the environment, just because it was, again, I'm here for the fun. It was too much fun not to.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on.
Nice.
Here's one for John Wayne.
John Wayne.
Communale. Do you write westerns?
Is this you, John Wayne? Is this me? You know what? Long answer, no. Short answer, yes. Now, because because I'm actually I'm contracted to have a splatter western come out in the second wave with Death Said Press. And as far as my work in progress goes, I have officially started that. Chris, that thing, like Chris and I, we talk about stuff, what we're writing all the time. That thing that I've tried to rewrite 3 times, I just put it away. I just started my western. So I don't really want to talk about too much about it, because we have this like chat where everyone's in there and it's like everyone's like, mine's about this and mine's about this, and I'm like, don't stop telling me. What are you doing? So all I can tell you is that I'm reading this like heavy into demonology right now, and can just absolutely consuming every western movie, spaghetti western that I can find. So.
I gave him a homework list of because
I'm reading Blood Meridian right now off the list.
Nice.
I read True Grit on the list, so I'm knocking that one off too. So that's what that covers. 2 birds with one something.
Yeah, because work in progress.
Work in progress. Yeah.
I've long been a Western fan, a big Western fan. So jumping into Western horror, I mean, I actually had written Western horror stories before the 13th Coyote, but just to piggyback on that, since we were talking about it, my current work in progress, it won't be my next book that's coming out. I have other books that are coming out, but the work that I'm doing right now, for all of you, this will be like an official announcement. There is a sequel to the 13th Coyote coming.
Yes. Okay.
It's coming. And it's probably going to, actually not probably, I'm already at 114,000 words, so it's going to be longer than the first one.
Jesus, man.
That one's going to come on 4 VHS tapes.
It's going to be a box set, John Wayne.
4 VHS tapes.
Yeah, I've already received complaints from Amazon.
Oh, no.
Really?
Yeah,
really?
It's too heavy. Their drivers are refusing to carry it.
Oh, okay. Well, the hell with them. So there most likely will be it most likely will be a trilogy when all is said and done.
Yeah, and for those who haven't read it has a huge like multiverse mythos going on.
Yes.
So yeah, that makes sense. Luann wants to know, Nadia, I'm putting you on the spot. What's next for Nadia?
I want to hear this.
So I am working on my first novel, I swear. I've said this since 2017. Like every time I've been on a show, I've been like, yeah, I'm totally working on my novel. But this time I swear I really am. And it's about a cult and people who escape from a cult. It takes place over a weekend. And it's based on Nexium. If you guys have heard of that, the cult that was like branding women in, so that's what it's based on, and I'm super excited to be doing it.
I am so excited for that.
And by doing it, I mean I have written 2,500 words.
Okay, well,
progress,
we need that. We need that like yesterday, Nadia.
Can you multiply that by like 5?
Cool. That's awesome. I love cult horror. You guys should all write cult horror, like collaborate together and make some epic cult horror.
We need like cult horror anthology, like more of those. I would read all of them.
I would read that all day long.
Yes.
Yes.
I need to talk to Bracken.
Dead Press cult horror anthology coming out. No, I don't.
Okay, so since this is an extreme horror live chat with no rules and no filter, I know that we should probably touch on the subject of trigger warnings because because it's a really important conversation to have, and it's a polarizing conversation, and I feel like because we all have a lot of mutual respect for one another, and because I love you guys so hard, I feel like we can do it without being like obnoxious about it. And then just present the opinion about trigger warnings, and then let our audience, if they have any kind of like thing to add, we'll let them add something. But does anyone have like a really good, strong opinion for trigger warnings, and then we'll do a strong opinion for no trigger warnings?
Well, I have a strong opinion for giving people the initial review, the reviewers trigger warnings, like this book is going to contain this, because they haven't really seen the back cover or whatever. They don't know what the book's about in general. So
That's a good point.
I like to warn the reviewers, just so in case they may pass on reviewing it, so you can avoid any confusion, any maybe bad reviews, because it wasn't what they're used to reading. So yeah, I like to give the reviewers a heads up on what they may be expecting. But as far as trigger warnings for the readers pretty much know what they're getting into with the extreme horror. So I've got to go with Chris on this and go on trigger warnings.
Okay, but to your point, Jared, like from a reviewer's perspective, like, yes, you can preface a conversation all day long about what a book is going to be about and try to like cull the proper audience for that particular book. But in a reviewer's world, there's no excuse for shitty writing. So it might come onto the table anyway, and I know what I'm getting into, but the writing is just shit. And there's no amount of extreme dazzling that's going to give me hard eyes at the end of the day. That's
the way it should be. Shitty writing should be called out.
Yeah, we need a trigger warning for that. This
Warning, shitty writing.
That's all we need.
Warning, this book sucks. Yeah, that would be great. That's my job as a reviewer sometimes. I'll read something and I'll be like, hey, this book is just shitty. It's just like, it's not worth reading about, whatever they decided was extreme horror.
Right.
Gore for gore's sake should be called out. If there's no plot to sustain the gore, and it's just pointless. So
it is, and it isn't. It isn't. Like I personally would prefer a actual story, and I always try to give that with mine, no matter how gory it is. I would prefer that, but I think there are people out there who just want gore and craziness, and that's fine if that's what you want. If it could be shitty writing, it could be shitty to all of us, but some people like that. It's just like like some of the guinea pig movies, the Japanese extreme horror movies. Like, they have no story. It's just people being tortured and ripped apart, and it has an audience. So I don't think that we need to just like automatically say that it's not for anyone at all.
Right. I mean, it's not hard to find it on Amazon. If you want to go on Amazon, you can find all the gore you want, without any substance. I mean, it's out there.
Yeah.
And
it has to have style, though. Like, that's to me, as a writer and as a reader. Like, when I pick up a book, I really could give a shit about the story. Because there's maybe, what do they say, 7 different stories that have been told in one form or another. And so I care about what's told. The story, and as a writer, to me, the story is how I get character from scene to scene and convey whatever it is I'm trying to convey with that book. But the author's voice and the language they use and the atmosphere of the book, the style, that's what's important to me. Where I like writers where I can pick up a book and without knowing who has written it, I can tell, just from their style, who have that really definitive, where it just oozes their. That's the kind of thing that I
think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you expect gore and craziness from somebody, and it's really that writing that is making, that continues you to go back to read the crazy shit that they do. If that's not there, then I mean, I don't know. It's gonna suck. Man, like a lot of Bizarro sucks now. I'm sorry, Christine. If you want to weigh in on that, some of it's just a stream for the sake, and it's stupid. There's no story behind it.
Yeah, I strongly prefer for there to be a story. I want characters that I care about. I want it to tell a good story. I was just saying, some people just are there for the gore.
Yeah,
I mean,
there is an audience
style that. You referenced the guinea pig movies. That is a very specific, distinctive style, and there is definitely audience, and I would say even like in the art world, like there is an audience for like extreme art, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just if I could just play like the devil's advocate card on trigger warnings, I actually do think that you guys make a great point. If you are writing an extreme horror from an extreme press, and that is what you do, and that is what your readers know you for, it makes total sense that like, what are you going to expect? You know, like no one's going to pick it up and be surprised by whatever's inside. But as someone who doesn't write extreme horror, I have a harder time, you know, because
Same.
like the expectation for me is like is much more, I don't know, like soft, like, you know, ghosts and sheets, you know, and I still don't know if I would ever do a trigger warning. But I do know that like the expectation is different for me. And the other thing I'll say is that like sometimes like true trigger warnings, like that are like sort of like, you know, my therapist has authorized this as like something that triggers me, is not necessarily like, you know, decapitation or something like that. It's more like a rape scene, or you know, that kind of thing. And like then that gets into like the plot issue, right? So like I totally am sympathetic to that, but like I do want to say that like there are people that do get triggered, and so like what I would do, like for instance, like movie reviews, like I will say if I'm like I'm like, this movie is amazing, but there's this, and I know it's something that like psychologically will
well,
mess people up for days. I will say like
totally. There's total validity in that. I mean, you don't want to necessarily trigger someone who's had a traumatic experience, and you know, like I certainly don't want to upset anyone in that regard. But my problem is when people write reviews on Goodreads or whatever, or their blogs, and they list these trigger warnings. Sometimes it's giving away enormous plot points to the book, you know, and if you're going to do that, you need to say spoiler alert, you know, because that when I hear trigger warning, what I hear is spoiler. That's what I hear. I don't read reviews that have those kind of things because of that, you know. So that's my beef with them.
To Nadia's point, when I think of trigger warnings, I don't necessarily think about gore or anything like that. A few years ago, around the time my first book came out, I was writing a lot of stuff from this perspective of parenthood and children and stuff like that. You know, my first novella, Bones Are Made to Be Broken, it's about a woman having a nervous breakdown. She's a single mom. And I wrote a lot of stories about dead kids, not kids being killed or stuff like that. And one of my first beta readers was my wife, is always my wife. But she was like, well, what's this one about? And I was like, it has to do with this woman who constantly has miscarriages, but becomes aware of a dimension where she carried a pregnancy to term. And she's like, I'm not reading that. And I felt like you had to warn her. So it's like, and so I get what you're saying, Kristopher, about it feels like a spoiler, but I kind of almost understand completely where Nadia's coming from, where it's like, the expectation outside of, say, Bizarro or extreme horror, it's a lot murkier because there are emotional, psychological things that people aren't ready for when they want a story about a drama or literary. So when we talk about trigger warnings, I feel torn in two different directions. Like, I completely get what you're saying, but at the same time, like, I don't necessarily want to make my wife cry.
Right.
Unless that's the intent. You know what I'm saying?
But I think the difference there is, like, the thing about like the miscarriages, like that's the book, that's what it is about, is this woman with these miscarriages and finally carrying a baby to term in another dimension. That's the whole plot. What I'm talking about is sometimes there'll be a trigger warning that's like, okay, this book isn't about, you know, killing babies, but there is a scene in the book where say, you know, like the villain or something, and there's like this suspense building up. It's like, oh no, we need to rescue the kid, and is the villain going to kill the kid? And in this particular book, the villain does kill the kid, you know, and it's 100 like pages Cujo. In. But see, and like that spoils it. Like if you were to do that with Cujo, where like you're like trigger warning, you know, there's a kid who dies. That completely spoils the ending of Cujo. So sorry to everyone who hasn't read Cujo yet, but you've had decades.
Had almost 50 years, 40 years.
Yeah. Like in the terms of like in the professional reviewing world, like a lot of editors will let reviewers know that it's not our responsibility to cover all of the triggers, the potential triggers out there, because there's so many triggers. And sometimes it just comes down to personal preference. Like there's a website that will tell you, you know, if the dog dies in a movie. Well, that's not really like a trigger warning necessarily. That's more of just a personal preference that people just don't like to watch a dog die. Okay, so that's something
I hate it.
I know that site. I know that.
I would rather read about the babies.
100,000 humans die.
So that's what I'm saying.
No
like
problem.
if people have thresholds where they're like, I won't. And I just saw someone in the comments say that too. I won't read anything where something really traumatic happens to a child, and I won't read anything so that's a personal preference. So the onus of that can't be on a reviewer, because there's thousands of those, and I'm not going to take up the bulk of my 800 words of a review to tell every single, you know, potential trigger warning in a book. That's really on a reader's part to like go and seek that out. And so I think really we could solve that problem by just saying, okay, like if it's a personal thing for you, like go and ask a fellow reader, or go and ask the publisher, or go and ask somebody else, and just find that information out for yourself. But if it's like a trauma thing, I totally get that. Like there are people out there who have legit trauma in their life, and you know, it's triggering.
But at the same time, the name of our genre is horror. Horror, like that's what horror is. It is fear and disgust and trauma. It's all of those things, you know, like that's, you know, so to be so sensitive that you need warnings on something that's called horror, it doesn't make sense to me. You know, it's like you're not picking up a book with Fabio on the cover here. It's a book that has like.
But do they have to only read romance because they have a trauma in their life?
No, but if you have a book that's just like the cover, it is like skulls dripping with blood. It's like you need to be strong enough to say, okay, there might be something in here that's going to be too intense for me. You have to just deal with that. It's not. I don't think that like all other readers have to have a story spoiled because there's some people out there that can't handle certain things. That's just my take on it. I know that it's controversial to be the whole like, stop being a baby. I'm not trying to be that way, but it's frustrating to me that, you know, like everyone needs to like pussyfoot around everything and walk on eggshells when we're trying to write stuff that is supposed to scare and upset people.
Yeah.
You know? So.
I was gonna say, like, I do a lot of like live like, you know, events and stuff where I'm talking to people about books, and we you know, we need to be conscientious of the way we present things to people in a live setting, especially. I was talking to a woman at an event, another author, and I just met her, and I was like, tell me about your books. And the first thing she says is she picks up this book and she says, well, before I tell you what this is about, this is a rape book. And she puts it in my hands, and I was like, okay. She said, so this woman gets raped, and then she basically tells me the plot of a rape revenge thing. And I said, oh, so this is like a rape revenge story, like I Spit on Your Grave.
Like I Spit on Your Grave, yeah.
And she's like, I've never heard that term before. And I was like, I would really not lead with this is a rape book. Because you don't realize that maybe that you're not, that's not what you want to say. You definitely have to think about the way you say things for sure.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely, when you're speaking to people in the public setting. So, but that also affords you the chance, because you're there, to tell people exactly what this is about, and they you know, they can say like, well, I don't like this, or don't give me rape books when I walk by, you know, things like that. So it's just that I think that's an important thing too, just when you're speaking to people live to consider.
All good points. Yeah, so this one I thought was interesting from Melissa. She just said, usually I just ask someone who's read the book already, and usually has to do with animals. And I think that's basically what it boils down to, is reader responsibility. And then I think like the author has a choice on whether or not they want to have something, like, oh, hey, there's some potential trigger warnings in the back of the book, or, if the publisher wants to be like, hey, like if you have certain trigger warnings that you want to know about, our DMs are open, you can ask us. Like, that's cool, because like Jared was saying, he wants to have like realistic expectations. And I think if readers go into a story with realistic expectations, that's everything, because I think a lot of people just formulate expectations in their head of what they think they're going in with, and then failed expectations will result in those angry rage reviews that you're talking about, where they were blindsided. But just having a dialogue with the right people, I think would
I just wanted to say in response to that, in particularly, is like, we mentioned a minute ago how we don't like to see dogs die in a movie, but sometimes those are great movies. Like Paul, you mentioned Red, Jack Ketchum's Red, and I'm not spoiling it by saying this because it happens at the very beginning, but a dog is killed in the movie and in the book, and that's a crucial element that springboards the whole story. Like, the whole story wouldn't happen without that. So as much as I don't like to see a dog die, or a dog, like, even reading about it in the book, it's like, if it's, like, I still wouldn't want a trigger warning. I still would never go to that website because I don't want anything spoiled for me.
Right. As a reader, when I'm approaching a book as a fan, I almost want those triggers when I'm reading, because that elicits an emotional response in me and kind of connects me to the book. So if somebody's going to spoil my emotional connection to the book before I even read it, then I probably won't read it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to also just say, a lot of it is about trust. With an author, I feel like after I've read like several books from an author, I will trust them more in what they're writing, the content. Like, for instance, I'm reading And They All Died Screaming from Chris, and it's, it goes past a lot of thresholds for me.
It's a nasty book.
It goes past a lot of like thresholds that I thought I had. And I said that about Chandler Morrison's book too, in a review, where I was just like, okay, well, I thought that I would tap out at certain things, but certain authors have managed to bring me over those thresholds because of the fact that I'm so invested in the story. And it's the same with Red, with Jack Ketchum. That is the first Jack Ketchum book that was successful for me, where I didn't tap out, because I tried to read The Girl Next Door and I was too emotionally invested. So that happens too, where it's like, I have young boys and I have teenagers, and I, as a mom, like, my mom heart can't handle certain things. And that one just like really, it was like, I mean, I can't even talk about it without kind of like shaking and getting a little bit weird about it, because it just like, it really hurt me, because it was a real story, and I kept feeling complicit in like reading something for entertainment that actually happened to someone, and it just was nauseating me. Like, I just couldn't do it. But then when I jumped into Red, I was like, Jack Ketchum's the best author I've ever read. Like, this guy could write his ass off, and I'll read anything, anything. So yeah, it depends on the trust level and how emotionally invested you're getting, and it's all personal preference. It's like, the onus is on you at the end of the day. You can't blame anyone else.
And it doesn't have to be horror that needs, that have these triggers. I mean, look at Where the Red Fern Grows. One of my all-time favorite books.
Jesus Christ, dude! You made me cry just talking about it.
And without the scene, you don't have a book. You know what I mean? You don't have people. You just have a bunch of boys hunting. So I mean, it's a necessary evil in some books.
I have that reaction to The Hours. I've talked about it in interviews in terms of that visceral reaction of literary.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what reaction to what?
Because The Hours is emotionally drama. I've talked about this in interviews. One of the most horrific things to me in a regular taking out of the horror context, and where I kind of struggle with dismissing the need for trigger warnings, because I can see some people have reactions. There's a scene. There are 3 timelines for those who haven't seen it. And the 1950s timeline, this mother, stay-at-home mom, very I refuse to sit down and watch it in over a decade, so I might be a little murky on the details. But she essentially drops her kid off to then go to a hotel, checks in to kill herself. And there's a scene after she drops the kid off, and you know what's happening. The kid knows something's up, and she's pulling away, and the camera cuts to looking out the rearview window of the car, and you see the little boy at the picture glass just banging on the glass, and that destroys me every single time. And it's like, I can't watch that movie because of that. And that's not a horror movie, but it's one of the most horrific things I've ever seen because the emotional weight of it. And I can't imagine what that scene must be like for someone who has experienced trauma of that kind of nature. And it's like, that's where, like I said, murky trigger warnings get real murky with me because they don't just apply to horror. We're kind of, when you buy a horror novel or horror story or watch a horror movie, you're kind of paying for that trigger. So I almost sometimes wonder if we're really the ideal audience to be, or critics to be talking about that. Yeah, I've heard people complain about horror all the time. But those are usually ridiculous. I think where the meat of triggers and the potential for it happens in other genres because people don't necessarily expect certain aspects. Like baby eating in The Road. Yeah, Cormac McCarthy is not necessarily known as a horror writer, so the baby eating scene was like, the fuck?
Yeah, a lot of people really reacted to that. Yeah,
very much.
Especially it's an Oprah pick, right? And so they have other Cormac McCarthy.
But Oprah didn't go, by the way, there's a baby.
Or what about the ending of Stephen King's It? Like, how come there weren't like a huge uproar of them just being like, oh, FYI, all the kids, all the teens get together for like a giant orgy, you know?
I thought you meant that
you didn't even ease into that. Orgy.
There was a trigger warning for It where like, trigger warning, this ending sucks. Like,
it was a giant turtle.
It's a big letdown after a long run.
I mean, the plot is already like children are being eaten. Like that is the entire plot. Like it's a huge book and it's all about kids being eaten. Like that's
What do you want?
I'd like to see him get eaten at the end. So
I agree with you. But the other thing that I think is kind of interesting about like when people bring up Stephen King, like why do people think that he, no one thinks that Stephen King likes to bash people's knees in, right? And it's like, I feel like he is associated with this very strong moral, at least for me, and like his later stuff, like a very strong moral core. And so it's almost like, well, as the bad guys do evil things in his books, but like, that's bad. And for some reason, I feel like that isn't true. And this is coming from someone who is not in the extreme horror genre. I feel like that isn't true with the perception of extreme horror. Like, why is that so? Versus like Stephen King can get away with whatever, I think, because people know. I don't know. Right. Just something to raise.
Yeah. I think that that's a really good point too. And I think that Stephen King doesn't get in trouble like other people do in that regard, even though like in Under the Dome, he has a character who's practicing necrophilia. But if you have like, an indie author doing that, and then in the reviews, you're going to get somebody be like, oh, this author, blah, 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 and attack the author. Like, that's the part where I just don't understand. It's like, you wouldn't do that with Stephen King. That wouldn't fly, but here you can sit here and just like attack an author and say he's, this or that. It just,
Yeah, and that's the other thing with a trigger warning is that it can misinterpret the book, or it could present the book in an unfair way. Like for example, one of my books, someone mentioned trigger warning of homophobia, and it's all because there's one moment in the book where people use the offensive F word for gay people, and it's one time in the book, and it's by a guy to another guy. And neither of them are gay. No one in the book is gay. And I'm like, okay, all right. Like, but the guy who said it was a jerk and an asshole, and it's bad. It's bad. Like, Nadia was saying, that, but that's kind of like his character. Now, by saying trigger warning homophobia in a review, it makes it sound like the whole book is a big
with a broad brush.
Right. Yeah. It's like so sometimes trigger warnings can be. Can if the reviewer is hypersensitive, can it could
misrepresent.
Misrepresent. Thank you. I keep wanting to say.
Yeah, they did that to Grady Hendrix' book too. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires.
That is the last book I've read that made me bawl at the end of it.
Well, and they ate him alive in the Goodreads reviews.
Why? It was so good. God,
because he writes in the 80s, okay? And like I was a child in the 80s, like as a teenager in the 90s, a child in the 80s, and we did call each other those names, and we called each other, the R word that's off the table now, and we called each other the F word for the home, it was just like there's a lot of things that we did that now is socially unacceptable. But if you're going to write from a perspective in the 80s and that language is thrown around, like that's authentic, just as like there was racism and segregation and that kind of thing prevalent. It just doesn't have to be the whole book. Like I think sometimes, that sometimes it's overused, okay, in certain
situations. What would you even go at that for that book? Jesus, it's written so well. That story is so powerful. Give me a break. What are you trying to pull things apart just to say like, oh, I don't like this because I can't write this well or something?
Yes, and it was, and they were saying it was misogynistic. And
oh my God, dude, that one made me cry about my mother after that. Misogynistic?
Yeah.
Dude.
I mean, but that's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling you. And like Grady grew up with like all these sisters and a mom and everything, and so he writes women really well. And then to be called misogynistic is like ridiculous. It's a ridiculous characterization of him.
Right. It is.
So we are at how long? We started at 2:30. So I mean, we could wrap this up if you guys want to. I could talk about this with you guys all day.
Yeah, I don't need to go anywhere.
Chris and I usually talk for 3 to 4 hours at a time about things like this, so you're gonna have to cut us off.
Yeah, our podcast is usually 2.5 hours. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just go for another 10 minutes or so. But
okay.
Because Mama That Said Press has already texted me when I'm coming home. So,
Mama, I'm coming home.
Oh, can we sing? Oh,
yeah, you can, dude.
All right.
This is a good point here. Donnie makes some good points. I've been seeing him here. He says, at the same time, contemporary culture is often very quick to attack the elements of extreme lit. It just makes me wonder how the average person would react reading 5 pages of Edward Lee. Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean,
your head would explode.
Not good.
Be like Scanners.
Like I was reading Hell House by Richard Matheson for the first time. And I started it. I had to read the entire book. Like I broke my eyeballs. I actually tweeted. It was like in the beginning of quarantine. I hadn't gone, anywhere. I was glued to the news, and I thought I really just need to like read a book and get my mind off of this. So I broke out Hell House. I couldn't stop reading it, and the font was actually kind of small, and I was reading to the point of like my eyes were getting blurry and like tears were running out of it, but I couldn't stop. It was so good. But I mean, you talk about like by today's standards, they would eat them, they
would eat them alive.
Yeah, I mean, he just broke all the rules and did all the bad things, and super misogynistic and fat shaming and just like the whole 9 yards. So
yeah, but like you mentioned earlier, like segregation, racism, stuff like that. Like if you're writing a book like these Westerns, like there are offensive racist terms that are used in my Westerns because they were used at the time. I don't overdo it. I don't throw the word around every page, but those are the way that those people were treated at the time. And I think if you ignore that, if you act like it didn't happen, I think that's more insulting in a way than using the word itself,
I also have a Nightworms reviewer, just to interrupt you really quick. I have a Nightworms reviewer, and she will dock points on a book if the N word is thrown around too much, because it's almost tone deaf. Like there's a point of like making it authentic, and then there's a point of like
absolutely
context in that.
Gluttonously using it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. Is like I don't put it on every page. I don't throw it around constantly. But
you're not Quentin Tarantino.
Right, exactly.
Well,
But-
and
You
it's
don't have
just
Samuel
like
Jackson to
violence.
defend you.
It's just
And
like
it's-
violence. If it serves no purpose, there's no need for it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, every time the word is used, at least in my book, it's by bad people, it's by racist people, it's by people who get what's coming to them. You know, it's not just used as part of the narrative. It's not used by every character. You know, it's I don't know. I think like it's just absurd to write a Western and have people like say African American. You know, like people weren't woke then. People weren't sensitive then.
It's period specific, and you've got to be true to the period you're writing about, or
Right,
else
right.
the book is just ridiculous. So I mean, and like Sadie says, I mean, they're like Sadie said, there can be overuse of it, and I can see how some people would be like, why is this guy, you know, why is every other word got to be that? And it doesn't have to be like that. But if you're writing a period piece, you've got to talk in the tone of the period.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if
absolutely.
I'm not invested in the characters, like with Christopher's book, The 13th Coyote, I'm invested. I've bought in. I want to know what's going to happen. I need to know what's going to happen. But if I'm reading a different book and it's being thrown around and it's rapey and it's, you know, it's testing me. Like at some point, the shitty writing is going to test me to the point of being annoyed and agitated. And then, yeah, a rage review could come out of that because you
Sure.
didn't give me anything. You didn't give me substance. I don't trust you. Like,
Yeah. That's a whole different complaint. That's a whole different
fair.
complaint. That's a valid reason to
totally-
negatively, review something.
Yeah.
I'm not
Maybe
saying
not
everything.
review it, you know, but
Yeah,
negatively, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying everything should be given a great review. No, there's plenty of trash out there, and there are plenty of books, even if they're good, that will use, you know, like the N-word way too much in telling the story. I'm not trying to advocate for anything like that. I'm just saying that I think when you try to write to a very woke culture, a very now PC culture, I like if you can't write a book about skinheads and how awful they are without putting that stuff in there. You know, it's like you're trying to tell a story here. You know, if you're not condoning racism by using the authentic language that was used. So.
And I think that if we get to a point where authors are afraid to use that language in their books when it's necessary, then we're doing them a very big disservice, and and we're taking away from the art of writing, you know, and telling a story. So I think there's limits. I think that there should be a little bit of limitation, but I don't think it should be to the point where people are afraid to express themselves in their writing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look at Joe Lansdale. If you read the bottoms, the N-word is everywhere. But for some reason, well, it's not for some reason. I know the reason is because I trust Joe Lansdale. I love Joe Lansdale. I know he's not saying or doing that because he's racist. Right. I know that he's telling a story. He's clearly invested in the period, in the time, in the character. I love that book, like, passionately. And if I were to read a review where somebody just, you know, docked it because of that, that would crush me. But then on the other token, like, I want to protect reviewers that are, you know, of color who are offended when it's used, you know, in a way that is cringy for them, you know.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like we gotta have a bit of like, you know, no one here is black, and like, you know, talking about the N-word, like we need to be a little conscientious of like the power that word has.
Yes.
Sure.
And I think like that goes, I would say, for a lot of these stuff, like that's potentially could trigger a trigger warning, so to speak, is like, would someone who has this trauma or has some association with this think it's gratuitous?
Or
would they be like, I get
it's all
it.
context. It's all context.
Yeah, it's subjective. I mean, it's the reader. I mean, it's up to him what he's willing to take, you know. So
I mean, I write a lot of historical stuff in a lot of different eras, and some pretty heinous shit went on in those other times, and the way people treated each other.
Right.
And, you know, and I don't want to tippy-toe around it, but I also, you know, some terminology is going to make me personally uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's like, I think I used the R word once in Spurnjackers from Hell, and it still bugs me. You know, it was right for the character, but I felt guilty just typing it.
Yeah.
You know?
That's something we need to keep in mind too as readers, is that the authors don't take joy in, you know, that
Well,
kind
assholes
of
do,
part of the story.
Sometimes
Yeah.
they do.
I don't want to assume that they do. I don't think we should assume that they do.
I mean, then again, in the same book, when I pitched it to Jeff at Deadeye, I said, you know, not just one, but 2 gratuitous dog fucking scenes. You know, so
Did you say gratuitous non-fucking scenes?
Dog
fucking scenes.
Oh, I thought it was like just a bunch of really just egregious dry humping.
No.
Okay, so if you go, does the dog get fucked in this.com, then those scenes
Yeah.
That's probably an entry on the Does the Dog
The dog died emotionally.
Lives but gets fucked. That's a whole nother.
I think that's a great note to end on.
I think we've all been canceled on Twitter at this point.
Yeah, by the time we get
Particularly me.
off, we're all done. No, I think that this was a really good nuanced conversation. I think that you know, because we have a lot of respect for each other, and because this is FaceTime versus behind a keyboard where you can't see each other and you don't know each other and there's not like a person staring back at you, it's easier to just kind of like, oh yeah, well, if that's your opinion, fuck you, bye. You know, like that's why I wanted to put this out here, is just to be like, hey, we could all sit in a bar really easily and have beers and talk about this for hours, and no one would get their feelings hurt, and you know, it would be a great conversation. So I think it's really important to do these, and especially like since we've all been quarantined and a little hostile, it's good to get off Twitter and get in front of each other. So I really appreciate that you guys made time for this.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It was nice to meet the people that I've never met before, Paul and Nadia. It was very nice making y'all's acquaintance.
Yeah. Good to see everybody.
Really good. And thanks everyone for the chat. That these people hung out the whole time. Like I'm seeing the same names that I saw that got here in the beginning. So thanks to everyone hanging out in the chat.
Thank you,
That's
everyone.
awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, let's
read more books.
Let's call that a wrap. Yeah, read all the extreme horror.
Read everything.
And then us, we're not extreme horror people.
Yes. Listen to Frank Stallone.
For everything.
Remember,
Chandler Morrison has a splatter western coming out, by the way.
There are 2 kinds of love, everyone. Remember.
There are.
That was a lot of last words. I hope everybody got all that. Okay, I'm ending. Bye.
All right, good to see everybody.
Bye.
Later.
Yay.